Alright guys, so I got a couple updates here on some stories that we have been tracking. Both the Gaza mass graves that were recently uncovered, as well as the Israeli government fearing potential ICC, International Criminal Court, warrants that could be coming for Benjamin Netanyahu. So let's go ahead and start off with the mass graves. So here we have an interview that was done on SkyNews with Israel's deputy mayor of Jerusalem, and she is going to try to spin this in a way that doesn't look so horrifying for Israel. So let's just go ahead and jump into this.
At least 283 corpses found in a mass grave at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. The UN Human Rights Chief has said he is absolutely horrified. Who do you think those bodies are?
Probably terrorists, because the ratio of combatant to innocent that Israel has is unprecedented in modern warfare. We know we've killed about 15,000 terrorists. There was a terrible battle in those areas. So the chances are...
How do you think these people died?
In gun battles with Israel.
Why do you think some of the bodies were found with ties around their hands?
Well, because we probably arrested the terrorists.
And then killed them?
Well, I don't know if the terrorists fought back. I wasn't there. But all I can tell you is that this has been a very difficult urban warfare, that nobody on earth has experienced this type of warfare, where the terrorists are hiding in tunnels, where they're cowards because they won't face their enemy. They just leave innocent people up there whilst they hide in tunnels that are bigger than the London Underground. And they come out, they shoot, and it could be that many of them were shot and they were shooting in a battle. And it could be that there were bombs thrown by them and grenades. There could be a million different scenarios of why these were found. But remember, we're in the middle of it.
I just to clarify for me, if you would, how do they fight back with their hands tied behind their backs?
Well, we don't know what they were doing before their hands were tied behind their backs, do we?
No, but if you've managed to cable tie them, they shouldn't,
yes, and maybe,
shouldn't subsequently find them dead, should we?
And maybe... Again, we're just conjecturing. Maybe his friends threw a grenade, and then what happens? Maybe there was a missile, maybe they threw a rocket, and then what happens? Again, this is conjecture. I wasn't there, you weren't there. We can't know. All I know is that our army has the highest...
Neither was Amnesty International, and they say this...
Okay. So I don't know if it's just that they think we're all a bunch of fucking idiots, or they're the most shameless liars on the face of the planet, or they're in such a bubble in Israel that they think these arguments are going to be convincing, or maybe it's some combination of all three of those, but they're really not sending their best. I mean, to anybody who has been paying attention to this story, or to any of these brazen atrocities that have been uncovered over the last 6-7 months now, these arguments fall apart at face value, right? So what are some of the things that she says there? First off, of course she says the IDF is the most moral army in the world, and we're setting records right now for the ratio of civilians that have been killed to militants that have been killed. I mean, you are setting records, but not in the way that you're trying to spin it here. You're setting records because this has been, in terms of modern historical warfare, one of the most destructive, the most deadly wars in modern history for civilians and civilian infrastructure. In that sense, yeah, you are setting records, but in the opposite way of the way that you're trying to claim in this video. I mean, the 15,000 Hamas fighters number, it's completely made up. There's no evidence to suggest that that's what the number is. I mean, this is the same Israeli government that will deny the Gaza Health Ministry numbers of 34,000 that have been killed so far. We know that roughly 70% of them that have been killed have been women and children. The math simply does not add up for a reality in which 15,000 Hamas fighters have been killed, on top of the fact that we've gotten story after story after story detailing how the IDF commanders in the field on the ground in Gaza will just arbitrarily determine a certain area that they are in to be a kill zone, and then they go out and they kill, specifically mostly anybody who is so-called a military-aged man, meaning a potentially just a civilian man, and they kill them, and then afterwards they label them as Hamas militants. So this 15,000 number of Hamas militants killed is not credible, and if anything, the amount of civilians that fall under that 34,000 number, that's likely an undercount, because it doesn't count the people who are still stuck under the rubble and presumed to be killed. It doesn't count deaths that come from other ways, like, for example, the complete obliteration of the healthcare system in Gaza. Anybody who dies because they weren't able to get access to that healthcare, these numbers don't necessarily reflect that. So she's lying and she's wrong about that aspect of it. But then what is her fundamental, defense here? It's that Well, they probably died in a gun battle with the IDF. Okay, so then the follow-up question is then, number one, why were there reportedly children that were found in these mass graves? Number two, why were there reportedly people who were wearing medical uniforms, meaning medics or nurses or doctors, who were found in these graves, right? Why were there people who were found still with like tubes coming out of them, indicating that they were potentially patients? And most importantly, why were there people who were found stripped down with their hands tied behind their backs, if these were all people who were just killed like mid-combat with the IDF? None of this adds up, guys, very clearly. And her defense for that, which is just like so ludicrous that it's almost unbelievable that she would say this live on air, her defense is that maybe the people who had their hands cuffed behind their backs and they were stripped down, maybe they threw a rocket, maybe they threw a grenade. That's what she just said there, guys. They had their hands tied behind their backs, and they somehow threw a rocket or a grenade. This is where we're at with the defense of the totally indefensible, right? This is what happens when you try to spin yourself in circles trying to justify something that is unjustifiable, right? Now, there have been different reports in terms of who put the bodies in these mass graves and when, but the underlying reality is that Israel is responsible for those deaths. Okay, that's the fundamental truth here. And so we move on to a couple of different things. First off, just as a reminder here, guys, this woman, this deputy mayor of Jerusalem here, is the same woman who just a few months ago, back in December, in another interview with SkyNews, claimed that Palestinian infants in videos that were circulating around online were fake dolls. She was saying videos of actual dead Palestinian babies were fake. That Palestinians were using plastic dolls to try to gain sympathy on the world stage. This is the kind of disgusting human being that we are talking about here. So honestly, I think this is the kind of story that should probably be brought up in every interview that she does to show how she should not be taken credibly at all on any of these claims. But it really is just pathetic, the kinds of defenses that we are stooping to now to try to justify mass graves that were found outside of hospitals. I mean, that's the core story that we're talking about here. Now, as a reminder, we had some journalists at some of these State Department press briefings who were trying to press these Biden administration ghouls. This one we have Patel once again, and you know, he basically just comes out and gives the defense that we're asking Israel questions and they're going to investigate themselves. So let's watch this back and forth here as a reminder.
This administration repeatedly says that it asks Israel, the Israeli government, to investigate itself. As a mediator for peace between Israelis and Palestinians, how does it ever make sense that the United States asks the accused party to examine itself and provide reports that you have previously said that you actually trust? What's wrong with an independent, scientific, forensic investigation? I mean, if the results of such an independent investigation prove the accusations to be baseless, then that would be in Israel's favor, wouldn't it?
So, as it relates to the continued reporting about, we're seeing about these mass graves, first National Security Advisor Sullivan spoke a little bit about this yesterday, but we continue to find these reports incredibly troubling, and that's why yesterday you saw the National Security Advisor call for this to be thoroughly investigated. We want to see these facts looked into, and simultaneously we're continuing to press the government of Israel for more information. The IDF has spoken to this in some sense already, but we are continuing to press them for additional information.
But why not have an independent forensic scientist, which the Palestinians are calling for?
We think this does need to be thoroughly investigated, but in terms of the modality, we continue to want to see some additional information from the government of Israel before we make other assessments. But you're asking the accused to investigate itself. We believe that through a thorough investigation, we can get some additional answers. We're also hoping to continue to get more information from the government of Israel on this.
But
go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a standard line that we get every single time there is an allegation of Israel committing some brazen war crime. Every single time. It is, well, these reports are troubling, or sometimes they'll use the word concerning, right? So we're concerned by them, and we're pressing the Israeli government for more information, and we want an investigation to be done, but not an independent investigation, an investigation done by the Israeli government. As this journalist points out there, the same government that is accused of creating these mass graves in the first place. So the core part of what his question there, I think, reveals is that he's asking him, listen, you guys, the United States government, you constantly talk about how you're in favor of a two-state solution. We don't need any of this outside international pressure. We're going to veto a two-state solution at the United Nations. We think we are best equipped to facilitate some sort of a negotiation between the Palestinians and the government of Israel, right? How can you say that at the same time that you are against an independent third-party investigation into claims like this? You're not being a neutral arbiter here. Okay, you are heavily, as aggressively as you possibly could, favoring one side, okay, while continuing to supply the weapons, the funding, to bomb and obliterate the other side of the two sides that you are supposedly in the middle of, trying to facilitate some sort of a peace agreement, right? I mean, it's utter nonsense. The idea that the Israeli government can be trusted with some sort of an impartial investigation, these are the most demonstrable liars in the world. They are the least credible sources of information in the world. They have been caught in lie after lie after lie. That is their MO. That is their baseline. Okay? And yet this is what we get from the United States of America. I think it says everything that you're not in favor of an independent investigation. What is there to hide? What is there to hide? If you don't want an independent investigation, it kind of says the whole thing, right? Now, even better, we got a follow-up here from the IDF. So this is Matt Berg. He says, I asked an IDF spokesperson if Israel plans to investigate the mass graves that were found in Khan Yunis. So here we had Patel. He just said, we're pressing them to do an investigation. So are they even doing a bullshit internal investigation? They say, investigate what? He replied, after calling the reports fake news. So even after the U.S. says, oh, we're doing this song and dance here, we're going to dance around and pretend as if Israel's going to be able to investigate themselves, even though it's an allegation against Israel and they're entirely, non-credible sources, even then, Israel still isn't doing the whole fake, well, yeah, sure, we're going to do an investigation, we'll get back to you guys as soon as possible. No, they're just saying, investigate what? Of course we're not going to investigate it. What are you talking about? I mean, it's just amazing. It is just amazing. Now, I want to move on to some more crimes that were just detailed here by NBC News, who did an investigation into the Israeli government, the Israeli military, striking Palestinians in areas that they previously told them were safe zones. So this is something we've talked a lot about on this channel. It's been clear that they've been doing this since the beginning. Now, finally, 7 months into this genocide, it looks like even the mainstream media here in the United States is unpacking this a little bit. So let's watch this.
An NBC News investigation reveals that this is one of at least 7 deadly strikes in areas our Gaza team filmed after the IDF had explicitly designated them as safe in December. This one in Rafah's Al-Zuhur neighborhood, identified as one of 3 evacuation zones in a leaflet dropped over Gaza, and on the Israeli military's website in a map last updated in December. When asked if there was anything more recent, the IDF told us the map was, quote, still accurate. Our investigation reveals that the IDF targeted Al-Zuhur, Al-Shabura, and Tal el-Sultan after it told residents to head there. On January 9th, an airstrike in Tal el-Sultan. The attack hits the home of the Nofal family there, killing 15. On February 12, 2024, our crews filmed the aftermath of an airstrike on Al-Shabura camp. They asked us to go to the Shabura area because it is safe. This is the safe area? Look around you. What happened? This man says. On April 20th, at 10 p.m., also in the Shabura district, a building leveled. Among those killed, a pregnant woman, who NBC News reported on earlier this week. Her premature baby briefly survived, but died days later. We asked the Israeli military multiple times to comment on the strikes documented in our report, providing precise locations and dates. It addressed one of the attacks, replying, the IDF is not aware of any strike at the provided coordinates and times in the query, blaming Hamas for telling people to ignore military directives, adding, the IDF will act against Hamas wherever it operates with full commitment to international law. Human Rights Watch program director Sari Bashi tells us these strikes are not isolated incidents.
They go to the places they were told to go to, and then they get hit either by an airstrike or by a ground force invasion.
Is there anywhere safe in Gaza?
There's nowhere safe in Gaza.
Of course there's nowhere safe in Gaza, and there hasn't been since the beginning. This is one of the go-to defenses that I see from Israeli government spokespeople or defenders in general is there is no other military that gives people a warning to flee an area that they are about to strike, right? This is something they tout as a benefit to them, as an example of their superior morality relative to Hamas. And then you see them still somehow blame Hamas for, I guess, telling people not to go to the safe zones. So you told people to go to certain places and designated them as safe zones. Then you bombed those places, and now you are blaming Hamas for telling people not to go to the safe zones. How does that make sense? You know, I mean, you bombed the places you told people to go. Regardless of whether or not Hamas was telling them to go there or telling them to go somewhere else, you still bombed the place you told people to go. So where's the justification there? It's nothing. It's just lazy. Every single thing is Hamas's fault. You know, we have no agency whatsoever. We can't be held accountable for anything whatsoever. I mean, they've been doing this since the beginning, and you'll notice a lot of those strikes were in the southern part of Gaza, in Rafah, right, where they are preparing for this upcoming ground invasion that the Biden administration reportedly has given the green light on. So, I mean, this kind of a story, multiply it multiple times over for what we're about to see inside of Rafah, right? That is the place, the apex of where a lot of this is heating up. Now, in the meantime, as Israel continues to bomb people in safe places that they told them to go to, and along the way for that matter, we have Israel and the United States, who are said to be working to prevent the International Criminal Court from issuing an arrest warrant against Benjamin Netanyahu. So here was Netanyahu's response to this potential ICC arrest warrant for him, and also for Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, and then also for the IDF chief of staff, Herzi Haveli, right, or Halevi. And so here was his response to this. Under my leadership, Israel will never accept any attempt by the International Criminal Court to undermine its inherent right to self-defense. It's real. I mean, it's not really undermining your right to self-defense as much as it's undermining your ability to commit brazen war crimes over and over and over again. But he says the threat to seize the soldiers and officials of the Middle East's only democracy, that standard go-to phrase that they use all the time, and the world's only Jewish state is outrageous. We will not bow to it. Israel will continue to wage to victory our war, our just war against genocidal terrorists, and we will never stop defending ourselves. While the ICC will not affect Israel's actions, it would set a dangerous precedent that threatens the soldiers and officials of all democracies fighting against savage terrorism and wanton aggression. Right? So I mean, first off, the only democracy in the Middle East. Are we really still doing this? You can't be an apartheid state at the same time as you are claiming to be a democracy. You can't be a Jewish ethno-state at the same time as you are claiming to be a democracy. You cannot occupy millions of people illegally at the same time. We know this tagline here is bullshit. For that reason, and also for the reason that who are some of the other undemocratic countries in the region, right? Because many of them are the same countries that you are currently trying to normalize relationships with. A lot of them are the same countries that are backed up by the United States of America, the countries that we give weapons to. We have security agreements with, like Saudi Arabia, for example, which is a brazenly, authoritarian dictatorship, obviously, that commits war crimes, that commits human rights abuses on a massive scale. But to say we're the only democracy in the Middle East, while you're simultaneously trying to cozy up to a lot of the most brutal, undemocratic countries in the region, is also pretty rich, right? And then using the phrase, Hamas is genocidal terrorists, we're not committing genocide, it's actually blood libel to say that we're committing genocide. I mean, it's all just, it's the standard bullshit that we hear over and over again. Now, just to give you guys a comparison point, as the United States under Joe Biden is now working to try to block the ICC from issuing arrest warrants, here was Joe Biden, back when it came to Vladimir Putin being given arrest warrants. It's justified. Joe Biden welcomes ICC arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin. So, I mean, here's the double standard of the West. Here's the double standard of the United States of America when it comes to international law. Again, we say this all the time. If you are a global baddie, if you are a geopolitical rival or an enemy to the United States of America, then we will try to use all of the levers of international law, and we will use language and rhetoric surrounding human rights and all of that against you. If you are an ally of ours, or if you are a Western country yourself, then international law simply does not exist. I mean, keep in mind, the United States as well as Israel are not even signatories to the Rome Statute. They're not even signatories to the International Criminal Court. So they don't recognize the authority of the ICC, because they don't want the ICC to be able to apply to them, right? But then when it comes to Vladimir Putin, who undoubtedly is a brutal war criminal, and I think deserves to have an arrest warrant from the ICC, but when it comes to him, very different, strong stance on this, right? And then we're working against the ICC to protect Benjamin Netanyahu. If Vladimir Putin is a war criminal, if he deserves an arrest warrant for what he's done in Ukraine, then you could give 100 arrest warrants to Benjamin Netanyahu for what he has done inside of Gaza, which proportionately is really not even comparable to what Putin has done in Ukraine. And what Putin has done in Ukraine is horrific, but what Netanyahu has done in Gaza over the last 7 months is unimaginably worse. Now, I'll finish off with this. We have a scoop here from a Reuters journalist who got their hands on an internal State Department memo. They say part of it was classified, but it included the most extensive and serious to-date warnings to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken over Israel's possible non-compliance with international humanitarian law. A joint submission from 4 bureaus: Democracy, Human Rights, Labor and Population, Refugees and Migration, Global Criminal Justice and International Organizational Affairs, raised, quote, serious concerns over non-compliance with international humanitarian law and Israel's conduct of the Gaza war. The assessment from the 4 bureaus said Israel's assurances that they're not violating international law are neither credible nor reliable. It cited 8 examples of Israeli military actions that the officials said raised serious questions about potential violations. Okay, and they say the assessment from the 4 bureaus also cited 11 instances of Israeli military actions that the officials said arbitrarily restrict humanitarian aid. So, I mean, listen, guys, the State Department understands full well exactly what Israel is doing right now. They know that they are nowhere close to following in accordance with international human rights law. And part of the way that we know this is because of memos like this. It's also because of State Department officials who have resigned by, significant amounts over the last 7 months over the handling of Israel in Gaza. And we know it from our own 2 eyes, right? For anybody who's been paying attention and has been closely tracking some of the atrocities that Israel has been committing. But we also know it from the United States, right? Because we had this recent story that came out on the Biden administration coming out and saying, we are going to use the Leahy law in order to sanction this specific Israeli battalion. The battalion in question is called the Netanyahu Battalion, which has a wildly brutal reputation even within Israel. Massive human rights abuses, abuse of elderly people, deaths within their custody of Palestinian detainees, etc. And so the Biden administration, they come out, they say, we're thinking about sanctioning this specific battalion. Not for anything that they've done in Gaza since October 7th or in the West Bank, but for stuff that they did before October 7th, right? So this was always a virtue signal. It was effectively meaningless from the outset. It was not even clear whether or not this would really be enforceable to single out a single IDF battalion for sanctions while continuing to give billions of dollars in weapons to the IDF in general. But now, Joe Biden is actually backing off even that weak virtue signal. Hear from Barak Ravid. The State Department has put a hold on its plan to impose sanctions on this IDF Netanyahu Battalion for human rights violations in the occupied West Bank and is reviewing the issue in light of information that Israel provided. So we're well past the point of using the Leahy law right now. I mean, we've known this for months and months and months. This is a law on the book, clearly states you cannot give weapons to a country, to a military that is engaging in gross violations of human rights. You cannot, according to the Foreign Assistance Act as well, give weapons to a country, to a military that is blocking humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza. And we know from this reporting, as well as from the previous reporting here from the State Department memo, that the State Department is fully aware that Israel is doing that. They know that they are arbitrarily restricting humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza. They know that there are IDF battalions who have engaged in, widespread human rights abuses and war crimes. They're just choosing to do nothing about it. That's what they're choosing to do. I mean, this is the second set of half-assed, if you could even call it that, sanctions that Biden has started to implement and then basically immediately walked back after mild pressure from Israel. So he is being, once again, absolutely dog-walked by the Israeli government. Now, I don't want to confuse that because at the same time that Joe Biden does look weak right now, and it looks as if he's just allowing Israel to run wild and do whatever they want, and Benjamin Netanyahu's really running the show here, at the same time as that's true, and Biden is weak in regards to Israel, this is also what Joe Biden wants. This is what he supports. This is what he has always supported, even since back when he was a Delaware senator. He has always been this way, ideologically, when it comes to supporting Zionism, when it comes to supporting the government of Israel. So let's not get it twisted. It's not as if, oh, Benjamin Netanyahu's doing all of these things that Joe Biden is so vehemently against. No, if he were against this, then he would not be giving them $26 billion. He would not be blocking a two-state solution at the United Nations. He would not be kind of indicating maybe some sanctions for one battalion and then backing off of it. This is not the behavior of somebody who has real problems with Israel's conduct and what they have done inside of Gaza. No, this is exactly what Joe Biden supports. And he's been there the entire way.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying